The polio virus can cause lifelong paralysis and death. In 1952, the worst polio outbreak in the U.S. infected nearly 60,000 children that killed more than 3,000 and left many paralyzed in tank respirators called iron lungs. 3 years later, Dr. Jonas Salk developed and introduced the first polio vaccine. Joining me with an intimate look into his life is Dr. Charlotte Jacobs, professor of medicine emeritus at Stanford University and author of the new biography, Jonas Salk, A Life. And Charlotte, briefly remind us of what life was like here in the U.S. before the polio vaccine was developed.
Well, I actually grew up during that era, and it was very frightening. The magazines and newspapers and newsreels had pictures of children struggling with braces, entombed in iron lungs. And what made it so fearful was that you never knew which town or which child would be the crippler's next victim.
And what's the situation with polio like today? Has it been eradicated in the U.S.?
Well, it definitely is eradicated in the U.S., except if you walk in from another country with it, then you could bring it back into the U.S. Thanks to the Global Poliomyelitis Eradication Initiative, which was started by Rotary and now includes 5 groups, polio is almost eradicated worldwide. So far this year, there are only about 70 cases, and most of those are in Pakistan or Afghanistan.
Now, your book reveals the struggle that Jonas Salk faced after developing the vaccine. He was an American hero. He was a celebrity, in fact, but not within the scientific community. How come?
Well, there were several reasons. One, the scientific community at that time all felt that only a vaccine made with a live virus like smallpox could provide lifelong protection. Jonas Salk believed you could use a killed virus, it'd be safer and as effective. Now, he was the junior member of a scientific polio community, and he didn't confront them, but he made that vaccine and tested it in secret behind their backs. Besides that, Jonas Salk was accused of grabbing the limelight and not mentioning other scientists who laid the groundwork. He did, but the press and the public didn't want to hear about Tom Rivers and John Enders. They wanted to hear about their hero, Jonas Salk. And finally, Jonas Salk reached out to the public in ways that no scientist ever had, or physician scientist. He gave interviews for Good Housekeeping. He went on television and showed how to make a vaccine with a Waring blender. Well, that did not sit well with the scientific community.
Sort of this elitism that you're a scientist. But didn't he say in your book that he called himself, you know, this is a public vaccine and I should be a public scientist?
Exactly. That's why he did it.
Now, you did a decade's worth of research, intensive, for this biography. Who did you interview and what kind of documents and archives did you need to get a hold of?
Well, I spent a long time here at University of San Diego where his archives, his extensive archives, are housed. I did need permission from his sons because those archives were not public at the time. I did the March of Dimes archives up in New York, but probably the most important thing to get a real picture of Jonas was I conducted over 100 interviews with friends, family, classmates going back to high school, other scientists, people at the Salk Institute, on. And they gave me wonderful anecdotes and a little more intimate picture of the man.
Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Jonas Salk didn't stop with the polio vaccine. He contributed to co-authored the first flu vaccine, I understand, and he did some work on AIDS.
That's absolutely right. In fact, his co-development of the first effective influenza vaccine occurred just as we were entering World War II, so it actually preceded his polio work. He was first very invested in influenza. He also worked on cancer and multiple sclerosis. When he was in his 70s, he was disturbed by the number of young men dying of AIDS, and no one seemed to be working on a vaccine or very engaged in it, so he entered the AIDS arena at that point in time. He was kind of jeered by some of the scientific community who said, he's the Rip Van Winkle of science. He's been asleep for all these years and suddenly woke up and thought science hadn't changed from when he left it.
And very briefly, we have to end on this. Why do you think it's important for this generation to get to know Jonas Salk?
Well, Jonas Salk is a hero and a human, very human hero, and we don't have too many heroes anymore. I hope his book is inspiring to some. It shows how one man can make a difference. I also think it's important for the public to know what infectious diseases are like prior to vaccines.
Dr. Charlotte Jacobs, thank you very much.
Thank you.